guys, and welcome to another video. But before we get into today's history theme, I wanted to tell you guys about a few things. So I am still offering commissions. They're still open. I don't think I'm going to close them because I'm probably not getting them for a very long time. I have actually gotten a commission and it turned out very well. It was from a teacher. She says that she loves her painting, and I'm very happy that she loves her painting. That was a learning experience. I've never done a painting quite that big, so I fixed my prices after that. But she enjoyed that painting, so links to those are in the description. You'll find them on my DeviantArt. What else was I going to tell you about? Oh yeah, I made another Discord server that is simpler and better in most ways and food themed because munchy. That's also in the description. It's all the way down at the bottom because it's the newest thing. If you want to join that, have fun. You're welcome to join. I'll give you your roles when you come in and introduce yourself. But anyways, it's time for us to get on to today's actual video. This one's actually scripted because I did me some research. So, I thought I'd make one about the Civil War. And, as a history buff, I love the Civil War. It's an incredibly fun and nuanced topic to research. And I was recently inspired by our current subject in my world history class. What can you expect, really? But nuance, you asked? How can it be nuanced? The whole war was started just over slavery. And that, my dear watchers, is what I'm here to talk to you about. But first, I'd like to tell you a story or two. Because that's what I do. So, this morning, as of writing the script, it was not actually this morning, we started our Civil War project in history, which is over because we're now on World War II. Much time has passed. So, I was extremely excited. I happen to know a lot about the subject, and I immediately picked the part of the project where I'd get to start at the beginning. Because not only do I know the most about the beginning of the war, but I also really like I like researching that. So, the project is really kind of funny. Instead of researching as you'd expect, we were to watch an episode of Crash Course U.S. History and complete the project template for that episode. So in the same class we were supposed to present, but we didn't because people are slow, but we were supposed to, you know. So in watching John Green's video, I realized that despite being a history buff himself, or at least claiming to be, he continues to hark on the idea that slavery is the sole cause of the Civil War. But of course, you say, that was the whole point of the war, and to that I say wrong. So I won't negate the fact that the war was certainly to some extent a product of the tensions caused by differing opinions on that of slavery, but that's not the whole story. So before I tell you what I know and reveal the plot of our tale, if I'm wrong about something, feel free to tell me in the comments. If there's something you'd like to add, you're free to comment as well. I'd love to hear any other history nerds out there talking with us and explaining some things. Anyways, so I think to start this video, we have to go back. Way back. So far back that we're in the beginning. To have an understanding of slavery in the U.S. during this time period, we also need to understand that slavery wasn't some new, amazing innovation of the South. Slavery has been around for as long as humans have been around, and as long as we remain here on this earth, so too will slavery remain. The southern U.S. was no exception, and in fact, slavery in the South wasn't just something that people did, it was a way of life and the entire basis upon which the agricultural economy of the U.S. was built. Now, let me tell you what the catalyst for the Civil War was. 2 words. Fort Sumter. South Carolina seceded from the Union December 20th, 1860. A convention sat around together the 17th of December previous and voted unanimously 169 votes to 0 to secede from the Union. They moved to Charleston to draft an ordinance, and on December 20th, with said ordinance, the state of South Carolina became the first southern state to secede. The president at the time, James Buchanan, stated that the secession was illegal, but did nothing to prevent or stop it. Here, my dear viewers, is where the biggest problem lies. You see, many of our great American ideals, those outlined in our Declaration of Independence and Constitution, were based on Enlightenment thinkers' ideas. Now, for those non-history buffs here, to learn a little something, were those high school students who came across this video for some project and have no idea what an Enlightenment thinker is, or, in fact, what the Enlightenment was. The period of Enlightenment was a time between 1685 and 1815. More simply put, a period during the 18th century. During this time period, old ideals like absolutism, the idea that a monarch is the absolute ruler, and divine rights, the monarch's idea that he is given his power by God, were pushed aside and challenged. The people who came up with these new revolutionary ideas were what we call Enlightenment thinkers. The period of Enlightenment is where a lot of reforms were born, labor laws, wealth, women's rights even. One of the most well-known Enlightenment thinkers is John Locke, and he is the thinker we'll be talking a lot about during this video. As I said, many of our American ideals, laws, and values are based off the ideas of those Enlightenment thinkers. John Locke is possibly most famously known for our use of his ideas in our laws and values. There are a lot of things that we took out of John Locke's set of thoughts. For example, the 3 natural rights of man: life, liberty, and property. Man has a right to his life, his freedom, and that which he owns. Similarly, in the beginning of the Declaration of Independence, it is said that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's a line that I'm sure you all recognize, and it's almost a direct copy of John Locke's 3 natural rights. But that's not the line we're here to talk about. It's actually the next few sentences. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate the governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and according all experience hath shewn, that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty, to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Now, the people of old wrote so beautifully, didn't they? But I'm sure that a lot of us don't understand, so allow me to translate. The first little bit there, that to secure these rights, the governments are instituted among men, deriving their powers from the consent of the governed. In other words, the people, us, create governments to preserve our individual rights. The government that we create is there to keep the peace with the laws of our own choosing, and we must consent to what they do. We do not serve the government serves us. The next bit explains that should the government do a bad job or become destructive of the rights of the people, we have the right to abolish it and create a new government that would better protect our rights. Later, it restates this fact, but instead of it being our right to do so, it is now our duty. This, too, is one of John Locke's ideas. Now, as far as I know, this idea is not in the Constitution, but I haven't read the whole thing as I'm writing this script, and if it is, I'd like you guys to point it out to me. But regardless, this is an ideal that the U.S. was built off of. We seceded from Great Britain July 4, 1776. The U.S., of all countries, should understand the point of secession. Back to the beginning of the Civil War. South Carolina seceded. The first big mistake was James Buchanan's idea that this was illegal. Secession is not illegal, and by this time, South Carolina had become its own country. January 9th, 1861. The first shots of the Civil War were fired. Cadets from the Citadel, a military school in Charleston, South Carolina, manning an artillery on Morris Island, fired on the Star of the West, a federal steamship dispatched by Buchanan to restock Fort Sumter with more than 200 men and extra supplies. This dispatch was the first act of war. South Carolina, after seceding, had requested that Fort Sumter be surrendered. The fort was technically a part of the state, and therefore should have been surrendered already. It was also an important defensive position for the borders of South Carolina. South Carolinians felt they needed the fort in order to protect their new borders. When the cadets from the Citadel fired on the Star of the West, they were protecting a valuable South Carolinian asset and deferring the possibility of war from the much larger Union. President Abraham Lincoln was later inaugurated on March 4, 1861. It was when he expressed his intention to resupply the fort that the Battle of Fort Sumter commenced. On April 12, 1861, military forces, including those at the Citadel, fired on Fort Sumter. It only took a day for the fort to surrender, and by the 13th, the battle was over. Fort Sumter was the battle that kick-started the rest of the Civil War. They seceded on grounds of the federal government not following its own laws, and they fought back when the federal government wouldn't recognize their secession as legitimate. And that, dear viewers, is what the war was really about. Secession is as legal as standing in the threshold to your own home. The Constitution doesn't put any limitations on state governments, except for limitations that come with powers allocated to the federal government. The secession of South Carolina was as legitimate as the colony's secession from Great Britain. Had the Union simply accepted that fact, the war may never have been fought. Instead, the secession was deemed illegitimate, illegal, and wrong. As a result, an estimated 62,000 lives were lost. Later on, in a Supreme Court case called Texas v. White, the secession was deemed illegal. Texas was trying to figure out how to pay for Reconstruction after the war. Having seceded, it should have been on the part of the state government, but because the secession was deemed unconstitutional, the federal government could pay for it all. This was the final nail in the coffin for the legitimacy of the Confederates' concession. No longer was it viable, nor was it real. Simply the forgotten cause for the bloodiest war in American history. So that was my brief explanation of the true origins of the Civil War. I do hope you all enjoyed. If you like this type of content, leave a like to let me know, and if I left anything out, or perhaps you want to add to the story, feel free to leave a comment. I love learning more about this kind of thing. If you like my videos and you want to see more, be sure to hit the subscribe button and ring the little bell. Videos are up every Sunday, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys, and have a nice day.